Notre Dame's quarterback battle just got even more interesting while the offensive line is running out of bodies. Plus, a freshman wide receiver is suddenly turning heads, and the defense could be even better than expected. We cover all that and more on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast, and I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I am thrilled to have you here with me on Wednesday, April 9th. And thanks for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'd really appreciate it if you took a quick second to subscribe on YouTube or your preferred podcast platform if you have not done so already. The race to 10K subscribers on YouTube marches on, and we're getting close. One other programming note, we are bringing the Friday mailbag back this week before the Blue Gold game on Saturday. It's been a few weeks since I've done a mailbag, so if you've got questions, send them my way. As always, you can drop yours in the YouTube comments below, or you can send them in on X at Locked On Irish, or DM the show account on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. As for today, we've got a great show on tap. Jamie Uyeyama from Irish Sports Daily is going to join me in just a moment for the first time in a long time to break down the biggest storylines coming out of Notre Dame spring practice after they held a scrimmage on Saturday that was open to the media. Jamie was there to witness it all firsthand, so he's got a bunch of interesting insights to share. We're going to dive into where things stand in the quarterback competition, how the offensive line injuries might impact the decision at QB1, and which players are emerging as standouts on both sides of the ball. We also get into how Chris Ash is enhancing the defense and what to watch for heading into the blue and gold game on Saturday. So, without further ado, let's bring in Jamie. All right, I'm joined now by Jamie Uyeyama from Irish Sports Daily. We're going to talk about the scrimmage that happened on Saturday, as well as just where things stand right now with spring practice. And it is an obligation to start with the quarterback. So what stood out to you from Saturday's scrimmage in terms of how each guy performed?
Well, I think it was not an easy day, and I know we're going to talk about the offensive line a little bit later. Everyone they were getting pressured the entire time. Every single one, even when working with the ones. I think if you were going to say that the best guy on the day was easily Kenny Minchey. Like I think by far. And he came out with the ones to start it. That's obviously an advantage when you're working with the first group. But I think he made the most of it. He handled the pressure the best. He was the most accurate, I would say, over the course of the day. He did throw one pick. It was tipped by Cole Mullins, and he had a guy, Sean Seviano, was right in his face when it happened, and he was about to get lit up. So it wasn't a good decision by him to throw that ball. Probably should have ate it, but that was really his only mistake of the day. A lot of the other stuff he did was. Even when plays that were drops were not made by receivers, he put it on the money. Like he was very sharp. He looked really good mobily, just in terms of like getting out of the pocket, running when he had to. I think that really kind of stood out the most there. It was not Steve Angeli's best day, but he also had probably the toughest time in terms of the pressure on him, just a little bit more than everybody else. And he had the most drops. Like he had one that would have gone for a touchdown to Cam Williams. Is a perfect read on an RPO. Ball was a little bit thrown behind. I would say that was partly a little bit surprising, because usually you see Angeli, one of the things that he does really well is ball placement. It's a little bit off on that, on Saturday. Definitely off on that throw, just a little bit behind, but still Cam Williams got to come up with it. It would have been 50, 60-yard touchdown. And then, CJ Carr, I thought, did some good things, but, for the most part too, he was someone who, struggled with the pressure, made a couple of really good throws. I didn't watch 7-on-7 as much because I was watching 1-on-1 O-line, D-line during that time, but I know he made, one of the best throws during that portion of it too. So I think it was up and down day for the most part. You don't want to overreact to one day. That's why they only give us this one day. So you can't really put too much on it, but I think, that if you're going to come out of it, you're going to say, Kenny Minchey's definitely in the race. He is very much a contender to start.
That's a huge development for Kenny Minchey, and it's honestly not that surprising when you consider the strengths and weaknesses of all the quarterbacks in the room. Like, if a quarterback was going to be dealing with a ton of pressure, out of all three of those guys, Kenny Minchey is probably best suited to deal with that, and Steve Angeli probably the least suited. But I think this is an important thing to consider now because, at the start of spring practice, quarterback coach Gino Guidugli said the most important time when evaluating these quarterbacks is during the team period. And Notre Dame's offensive line was already dealing with injuries, and now we've learned that tackle Guerby Lambert suffered a torn labrum, and he's not going to be back until the fall. So these quarterbacks are working with like the 2s and 3s, even if they're going out there with the 1s. Like, Notre Dame's offensive line is just so depleted at this point. How much does the state of the offensive line affect the decision about who will be the starting quarterback?
I mean, it definitely has an impact. And I think from that perspective too, it ultimately delays when they were just to say, if I don't think they were going to make a decision by the end of spring, but it makes it impossible, I think, to even come to that conclusion. Even if you said, well, this guy's been better, there's just so much difference even between going with the one offensive line right now, because at least you have guys like Sullivan Absher, Charles Jagusaw. We know that Charles Jagusaw is a starting level player. Sullivan Absher is like very close, like if not a starting level player. And even I would say that Joel Otting at center, he looks like a solid guy, like definitely like a backup level center that could play, step in if he needed to. If you taking it down from there, and you're playing like 2 freshman tackles out there who I have a chance to be pretty good players. It's not that they're not going to be good players later on. It's just they're going to get beat. They're going to go against Bryce Young, who is ascending, and all of a sudden, he's looks like a much different player than he was a year ago. Has really taken a jump. It's just not fair. It's not fair to judge all of these guys based on that. So you kind of have to take more of like the 7-on-7 and all that, and take that into the equation a little bit more. But obviously what matters the most is how they're going to be able to run the offense, get in and out of things. But it can't be just about handling pressure, because it's like saying, well, we're only going to judge it based on how these guys run a 2-minute drill. You would never pick a quarterback just based on how he ran a 2-minute drill. Obviously that's something important. You want to look at that, but it's not everything, right? So I think it just makes everything a little bit more murky, which isn't a great thing, but it's also not a bad thing, because I think all the guys are probably going to stick around in the summer and be there for the summer, because they still all got a shot. Unless, one of these guys reads the tea leaves and just thinks like, it's not going to be me. Like, that could happen. But my read on it right now is that I think there's a very good chance that all 3 are still around in fall camp competing.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it's trending that way now. Obviously, some things could still change between now and when the spring portal window opens, which I believe is coming up here on April 18th. But at this point, it doesn't seem like anyone, at least from the outside, has taken like a meaningful step forward in the quarterback competition. It seems like it's still very much a 3-man race here. So how do you think that this plays out going forward? Because if, let's say, all 3 guys stay, they all come back for the summer. There's obviously workouts. There's time to, get these guys some reps, even if it's not like mandatory stuff. And then you have fall camp coming around. Like, eventually they are going to have to whittle it down to 2 and then 1. So do you think that, considering how well these guys have performed in spring practice, do you think that this has delayed the timeline a little bit in terms of when they'll announce a starter? Because I don't think anyone expected it would be after spring anyway. Or do you think that this is kind of what the coaching staff expected because they knew it was going to be a 3-man race from the very beginning?
I think they knew it was going to be a 3-man race, and maybe they expected it to be like separated into 2 heading into where it is. I mean, no one would have said Tyler Buckner was going to transfer the day after the spring game a couple years ago. That wasn't in the cards for anyone. And in fact, a week before, he looked much better than Sam Hartman. Again, it's one practice, but that's how it looked at the time. Like, it looked like, oh, he's actually kind of making it a competition. So anything can happen, anything can change. I think having 3 to start and them having to kind of juggle that is going to be difficult at the beginning of fall camp, because there's so much more about when fall camp and everyone's back, and you want to get ready for Miami, and you want to do all of these things that you're doing to like prep and install and do all of these things within the offense. But I think what it does is it just that means that, like, where before, if it was just 2 guys, maybe you kind of have to take it in and like say, okay, we're going to let these guys split as much reps as possible and just do it. And then I think you got to like accelerate everything at the beginning of fall camp and say, well, maybe we wouldn't do as much 11 on 11 early on, but I think we got to, because we have to get a better look at these guys early, and we have to be able to make an adjustment. And then you kind of have to be able to say to like somebody like, it's going to be these 2 that we're going to go for. And maybe that forces a guy to leave, but ultimately you kind of have to do it at some point. You can't just try to make everyone happy so they'll stay. You have to pick a quarterback. And there's always the chance that, you know, you could juggle quarterbacks at the beginning of the season, or one guy starts early and whatever. Anything could happen, but ideally you want to have a QB1 and and you have that guy set for the whole season.
Jamie will be right back to discuss which early enrollee freshman has been really impressive so far. We'll also get into the state of the tight end room, but first, a word from Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, you'll always find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Let's talk about some of the guys that these quarterbacks are going to be throwing to. Elijah Burress is a name that keeps popping up, the early enrollee wide receiver. He was targeted a lot in this scrimmage. Do you think he has a legitimate chance to crack the rotation this fall, or is he just getting a lot of attention because so many other receivers are out, including Malachi Fields, who's not even really able to participate, Will Pauling, Micah Gilbert suffered that broken hand. Like, a lot of guys are out, but it does mean that these young guys like Elijah Burress can step in and make the most of it.
It is a great opportunity for him. It's a great opportunity for Cam Williams as well, obviously, who's getting a ton of reps to the boundary. He was like working with the ones at the boundary. In saying that, I think he has a shot, but it's more of a long shot, because it's also similar to how when you're evaluating the quarterbacks, knowing that you don't have Fields, knowing that, you know, Jordan Faison isn't out there every day, knowing that Pauling like just came back and wasn't there. That's Gilbert obviously getting his hand. That's probably 4 of your top 5 receivers right there. So you're working with basically like 2s on the offensive line and without 4 of your 5 receivers for most of the spring. You know, I assume all those guys, you know, if you want to say, hey, nothing's there for Gilbert, those other 4, I think it's pretty safe to say all those guys are going to play and like play a lot. So where's Burress stand? Can he be like the 5th guy, the 6th guy, maybe? It's a possibility. I think there's a chance. I think the reason he's getting targeted, he gets open. Like he's a good player. He's someone you could see a lot there where he's got a chance to be a really, really good player. You know, he also, you know, drops some passes. in the scrimmage. Caught the touchdown to end it, but he dropped some balls too, right? So it's going to be about him kind of forcing the issue and saying like, I'm too good. You have to play me, because that's really the only way a freshman receiver is going to be able to play. And I think also too, it's such a huge topic about like the drops at receiver, which I think is a little bit overblown, because obviously Bo Collins, he had problems with drops all the way through Clemson. That was a thing for his whole career. So him having that at Notre Dame, it wasn't a surprise. Faison having the drops that was a bit surprising, because he didn't have that as a freshman. But that really wasn't a problem for anyone else on the team. It wasn't a problem for Malachi Fields ever at Virginia. Jaden Greathouse is like as automatic as it gets. So it's going to be about Faison, whether or not he can catch the ball consistently again. And Pauling had problems with some drops last year. Didn't as much the year before when he was with Mike Brown at Wisconsin. So we'll see there, but you don't want to add somebody else in the mix who's not consistently catching the football. If he cleans that up right there, I think then he does have a shot at playing.
Yeah, you think about the injuries on the line and everything they're dealing with at wide receiver, like making a decision about the quarterback feels impossible at this point in time, especially if they're dropping the ball. But I also want to ask you about the tight ends, because I read that Eli Raridon had a big play on a tunnel screen. I'm really excited about what he can do in his final season with the team. And make no mistake about it, Notre Dame absolutely needs Eli Raridon to break through this season, but I'm pretty concerned about the depth of that unit overall. Like, how do you assess the state of the tight end room right now?
I don't think it's as bad, as it might appear, just because I think Kevin Bauman, in terms of if Eli Raridon, I mean, obviously it's important he stays healthy. He's had the previous knee injuries. So, that's something to flag. But as long as he stays healthy, I think they're going to be fine, because I think they're primarily going to be like an 11 personnel team. I think they're going to be a 21 personnel team a little bit more. They're going to use two backs a little bit more this year. Not a ton, but a little bit more than they would, So that'll cut into a little bit of what they're doing with like 12 and 13. And if they want to do 12 and 13, Kevin Bauman can play. Like, he can block. He can get open too. And Jack Larson, came in, he was about 225 pounds. He's 250 now, and he can move pretty good. He didn't get a ton of run in the scrimmage or anything like that, but I think he's someone who can be able to play. I also think James Flanagan might be someone who was able to play as a freshman. So you'd feel a lot better if Cooper Flanagan was healthy going into the season. I imagine that if he comes back at all this year, it'll be very late. You tear your Achilles in the college football playoff, he's probably not going to be back for, at least to like October, November at the very earliest. And that takes something away there. And it means that Raridon needs to stay healthy. In saying that, I do think that, like, we talked about where they're at receiver, and obviously not all those guys are available. They're probably going to be like a good top 5 at receiver. They're loaded in the backfield, so they could do a little bit more things with personnel there. Then I think, we'll kind of mask some of the stuff as they kind of build up the depth there at tight end.
So you mentioned something that I think is really interesting, that Notre Dame might run more 21 personnel this year. And if you're unfamiliar, 21 personnel just has 2 running backs on the field at the same time. Jeremiah Love tweaked his hamstring on Saturday during that scrimmage, and I'm sure that's going to be the last we'll see of Jeremiah Love in spring practice, because there's really no reason to put him out there if he's dealing with any semblance of an injury. But prior to that, he had been getting a ton of work with the wide receivers, not just like, running a drill here and there, catching some passes. It seems like he's really repping with them in practice. Do you think that's just to refine his skills in that area, or do you think we're going to see a shift in how he's used this season?
I mean, it's partly to refine his skills, but I do think they're going to see a little bit of a shift in how he's used. I just think you have a talent like that. I think the coaching staff absolutely recognizes it. And I think they wanted to do a bit more of it last year, to be honest. And obviously the first game of the season, and something that, Greg Flamong and I have talked about, that they came out of the first game of the season First time in the red zone, he lines up in the slot. They try to run like a slot fade. He didn't run the best route, and
yeah, I remember
then we never saw him again there, right? But I just think he caught 28 balls last year in 16 games, but also he was injured a little bit. He didn't play as much. His usage was down because of the injuries in the college football playoff. I think if he would have been completely healthy, I think they would have thrown the ball to him way more in that time. We would have saw that tick up. Brian Williams caught like 40 balls, like 42 balls in his last season. I think 40 catches, it isn't crazy to think that he could be like 30, over 30, mark it down. He's going to get over 30 catches this year. 40, I think it's on the table. And I just think with what they have there too, they did, one play in the scrimmage, they had Jabron Payne and Aeneas Williams out there in the backfield together with Aeneas Williams motioning out. We saw him make the big play in, lining up out wide against Penn State. They have the talent to do that, to have that kind of versatility. And the way that I look at it too is very similar to, 2022 when they would have Tyree and Diggs out there together. And both of those guys could catch and were good receivers and could do different things. Love is like a heightened version of that. He might be the best back that's ever played at Notre Dame, certainly in talent wise, and obviously he has to have the kind of year that people expect him to kind of go down as one of the greats. But he can only do that if you get him the ball as much as possible. So I think this is an extra way to get him the ball.
Yeah, if moving him out to wide receiver means we never have a situation again like the second half of the Northern Illinois game where you're like, wait a second, Love hasn't touched the ball since 10 minutes left in the third quarter. That can never happen again. But one last question on the running back. So I think it's the deepest and most talented unit on the entire team, to the point where I don't know how they keep all these guys after spring. Like Kedron Young as a 4-string running back, that guy could probably start on Power 4 teams across the country. And then you got Jabron Payne, who worked his way back and has, made some big plays for Notre Dame. It's kind of funny looking back at that Ohio State game in 2023. Like the only two guys who scored touchdowns at Notre Dame were Jabron Payne and Rico Flores. So you can't really count him out either. Did any of the other running backs stand out on Saturday with Love banged up?
Not really, just because, a lot of it was due to the O-line situation, right? And then how they were used. But you saw they threw the ball to Price. They threw the ball to Aeneas Williams. They didn't make like big plays or anything like that, but, they did throw the ball to them. I thought, Price looked good running inside when they did run them. Young had a couple of good inside runs, but there wasn't anything. Nothing came close to breaking anything. I do think Jabron Payne, I will say, because he's like easily the most forgotten guy, he looks good. Like he does not look like a guy that is coming off an ACL injury. He looks very healthy out there. They do have too many guys. That is a thing. But I also think if you look at say Alabama and Georgia and how loaded they are in the backfield every year, guys just wait their turn and they tend to they know that, hey, my turn's coming. And I think Kedron Young, yes, he could go somewhere else and play more this year. But I think he's also realistic to the fact that Price and Love are gone after this year. They're not going to be there. So that's going to open up things, for him, where he could all of a sudden go from he's got 40 carries this year to being Audric Estime, the next year, right? That's on the table for him.
So we haven't even talked about the defense yet, which is probably a disservice because it sounds like they were kicking the offense's ass all day in practice. But, outside of just beating the depleted offensive line, I don't expect to see any huge schematic wrinkles under Chris Ash yet because he's only been around for 9 practices. But was there anything that stood out to you in terms of the way that the practice was structured, the technique? What have been the biggest differences you've noticed with Chris Ash now in charge?
Well, I think even just with tackling circuit, that was just structured a little bit differently in terms of what they were doing there. I know there's been people have kind of talked about Chris Asher's big like rugby tackling guy. That's like one of the things that he brought into his previous teams. So they're doing a little bit more of that kind of stuff. I think they tackled really well in the thing. Specifically the DBs tackled really well. Like I really can only think of like one missed tackle from the DB the whole time. Adon Schuler missed Raridon on that big screen that he had. Other than that, like they tackled really, really well. Like the safeties all really tackled really well playing the run. I don't think there's going to be too much that's crazy change. They played a ton of zone on the day. They didn't blitz as much as you would see from like an Al Golden defense. I think partially that's because of the offensive line. They were like, we can't just bombard these guys, although that never really seemed to stop Al Golden. He just kind of went for it all the time. But I do think they'll blitz a little bit less this year. I think they'll still blitz a lot, but they're not going to. But I think part of that is that they feel they're going to be able to rush with 4 a lot better. And I think that's probably where you're going to see like a little bit of a bigger difference. But I still saw a lot of the same stuff in terms of like, movement up front, in terms of like slanting the line, guys, running some stunts. They didn't run a ton in this because they didn't want to overwhelm the offensive line again. But I think they're still going to do a ton of that.
So I was reading some of your standouts, and Tay Johnson, the safety, is one name that's come to mind. Redshirt freshman, but also Jalen Sneed at linebacker, who's put on some weight. And you just said that they think the defensive line is going to be able to get pressure with force. So it seems like every single unit on that defense is trending upward. But which position group out of those 3 do you feel like has really changed your opinion the most from what you kind of expected going into spring practice to where they're at now?
I would say that I think at safety, so DBs in general, I think people feels good about the corners. You're not going to see too much of, because Carson Hobbs, he had to play nickel. I wish we got to see a little bit more of him playing outside corner because Devontae Smith did practice. But I just think overall, like they at safety, I think you had some questions because Jalen Stroman, isn't practicing, the Virginia Tech transfer. He's someone who is going to be a contender to start, but having Tay Johnson look where he's at right now, where he's really like he's in the mix there with Luke Tal to start. Where I don't know, I think people maybe hoped for that, but I don't know how many people had like expectations that was definitely going to be a sure thing because, he played corner last year because they had to, because they had injuries there. And he was also someone he like barely played defense in high school, played quarterback and played receiver. He kind of had to do all this stuff. His high school team wasn't the greatest. Like he had to do a lot of different things for his high school team. And he's put on 20 pounds since he's been at Notre Dame. He looks like a different guy standing next to Luke Couch. If you would have put him beside Luke Couch last year, he would have looked like, okay, this guy's a high school kid and this guy's a college football player. And now, even though Couch is a monster, he fits in with him. And I think the main thing is like, he's a great athlete, but there's a difference between being fast and playing fast. And he played fast. And when you have that, and when you have like, I think some of the guys, like obviously Urlacher, you see Jadon Blair as a freshman. Ethan Long had a really nice hit in the thing, in the scrimmage as well. I just think they got good numbers there. Like they got guys who can play. Like they're going to have some depth there. Obviously, Schuler's a good player. Like, and that just means to me that I think they're going to be in good shape. It's not going to be one guy who replaces Xavier Watts. It's going to be impossible. No one is going to come in. Anyone who thinks Tay Johnson is going to come in and be Xavier Watts, it's totally unfair. It's unfair to anybody. But by committee and just what they can do as a whole with the defensive backs, I think they're going to be in pretty good shape.
Well, if you ask Tay Johnson, it might not seem like that big of a stretch because I saw a quote where he said that he's like a little bit more rangy than Xavier Watts. And I was like, all right. I mean, you might not have like the ball skills or like the football IQ that he had, but I guess we'll see. He doesn't have to be Xavier Watts. If he has an Adon Schuler-like season this upcoming season, that'd be massive. And it's certainly within the realm of possibility because That's what Adon Schuler did. He didn't play at all his freshman year. It was kind of an afterthought. Everyone thought Rod Hurd was going to start over him, and then he basically won the job in spring, and I don't know if Tay Johnson is going to do that, but it's great to hear that he's trending upward. Okay, we are just a few days away from the blue and gold game. It's going to be a little bit different. They're not even drafting teams. They're dealing with a ton of injuries, but what are you most looking forward to seeing on Saturday that you think is going to give us a good glimpse into what this team could be in 2025?
I think, and I'm going to kind of flip it into, because I almost said the defensive line for that before, but I think a lot of people are going to see the defensive line, specifically like the defensive tackles and like the depth there, that there's a lot of like guys that can play at defensive tackle. And that was going to be a big question, whether or not anyone's going to be exactly Howard Cross or Riley Mills. Like they're going to be at that level. We'll wait and see if that can happen, but man, there was like some really, really exciting flashes from a number of guys. Jason Onye like really looked like he was the same guy that when he left, where he was really kind of taking off. I thought there was good stuff from the transfers. Both Jared Dawson and Elijah Hughes both showed stuff as pass rushers. In one-on-ones, not just in team. Cole Mullins looked really good as a pass rusher. I don't even know how much he's going to play this year at all, and he's still undersized, but I didn't even think he was going to practice in the day. And he was one of the guys who was like eye-opening for me, and just in terms of how we practice. So, and then Armel Mukum looks like he's got real dude potential too. So, I think there's going to be a lot of those guys that people, Notre Dame fans, especially like the casuals who come in, don't really know who's going to be next of Cross or Mills. They're going to see some guys and they're going to be like, who's this guy? Like, I think those guys are going to impress a little bit.
JV, this has been awesome. And I know you're doing a ton of stuff for Irish Sports Daily. So before we let you go, tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find all my stuff at Irish Sports Daily. You can find, I on Irish Sports Daily Power Hour every Monday. Greg Flamong and I do Hit and Hustle twice a week. Obviously, we do more stuff during the season too. We do it every Tuesday and Thursday. Check that out. And 6 Thoughts on Thursday. Big column I write every week too. So check that out.
Hit and Hustle is one of my favorite shows personally, and I got to let you go right now because I know you have to tape with Greg here shortly, and I don't want him to get mad at me. So, Jamie, thank you so much for taking the time, man. This has been great.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow, but I'm going to release the episode a little bit later in the day than normal. So Rodney Dunham, the 5-star defensive end that we've been talking about a lot on this show, is set to announce his commitment tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. After he announces his commitment, I'm going to get an episode up reacting to the news because that is by far the biggest news going on around Notre Dame football. So be on the lookout for that a little bit later in the day, probably around 4:30 Eastern time. Also, remember, submit those mailbag questions if you want to be featured on the show on Friday. And the best way to never miss an episode, no matter what time of day it gets released, is to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And if you liked today's show, please give this video a like below if you're watching along on YouTube, or you can rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a review. I'm telling you, it goes a long way in supporting the show, and I really do appreciate it. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.